But having an idea of what you're going for in your head gives you a direction. Otherwise, you're just kind of stumbling around hoping for the best.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point here, John, as well. Like, this is part of the reason why I have started to really formalize what I think. Most people, most coaches, even probably the highest tier of coaches across most games, have never written down what they think. They've just thought about it, right? It's just an idea in their mind. Um, and what I've found as I've tried to formalize what I've done, so I wrote a course for Valorant coaches, and I'm now trying to write a book that I guess it's predominantly supposed to be aimed at players, but I think it has much broader implications than that. When you come down to try and write down everything you think and how it all links together and what it all really means, and then you start doing the deeper research on well, what does the science say on this particular topic? I think this, but is that actually, has someone proved it or proved it beyond reasonable doubt, I guess? Often we don't do our due diligence in doing that as coaches, partly probably because we don't have the time. But I would say it's a worthwhile exercise, particularly when you're early in your career, because you can start building towards something. And then again, coaches often don't do this thing to kind of sell themselves. Like, an organization comes to you and is like, what's your vision? And you're like, it's a really abstract thing. It's hard to put into words again without formalizing it, right? So you can be like, here, I've got this is my book. This is the TLDR. It's like 3 pages long. It tells you kind of my general thought process, how I think things work. And, if you think that this is the kind of thing you agree with, then take a look. I think we could maybe work together or not. It's something that would definitely set you apart as a coach, especially early in your career as well. And I think help you develop what your vision is more comprehensively.
I think it can be a really painful process, though, right? I mean, I'd love to actually to speak about this book in particular, but we'll start with just the idea of doing that, because I think one of the things that I've noticed a lot, and I've worked in esports for a decade as a coach before I started doing this, but this idea of when you start to put things on paper and you start to actually think back through everything, the problem is that if it's like, it has this slight vagueness to it while it's still in your head, and you think you know what you mean by this term or how you would approach this certain situation, but because it's got that vagueness, it's almost you've got that out. As soon as you decide this is the thing, I'm putting it on paper, and yes, I might disagree with it in a few years' time, and obviously this version will still exist in the world, but at least at this moment, this is exactly what I think. And as soon as you filter that down into one specific spot, now it can be wrong a lot easier than when it was a kind of vague idea. So how was the process for you when you first started writing anything down? And then we'll get onto the book specifically in a bit.
Like you say, I think it's maybe hard to completely distill ideas when they're just ideas. And then in my mind, they should be written in such a way that someone that has, like, this is their first game can go in and understand. Which is really, really hard, right? Especially any game, especially MOBAs, right? I think this goes especially for MOBAs, but they are really complicated. I mean, and again, this is why you have to start at the simplest step, right? The idea is to kill the enemy's base, right? Okay, that's like, okay, well, I can understand that. That's a simple enough principle. And then, okay, there's 5 players on each team. Oh, okay. Oh, there's 3 lanes, like, and there's towers in those lanes, and you kind of go up and like, you have to explain it all from the ground up, and I guess so they can understand your language as well, right? Because there's more than one way of describing that and how you would break that down, right? How you would again, I'm kind of using the MOBA example because people will be familiar with it, right? But how you would break down different parts of the map and how you would break down, specific approaches to doing this, right? Different phases of the game, for example, and all of those things, and then breaking it down in a way so that, again, you're starting from a level where everyone understands what the game is, even in the first place, which, to be fair, is also really, really hard. Right? If you just want to explain what the game is, which is, of course, a prerequisite to describing any strategy, that's really hard too. That's hard. in itself. But once you've done that, once you believe that everyone that has read it should have understood what you mean by the game, and what it means, and generally what the kind of correct plays are. You know, like, for example, I'll just use a stupid example again. I only know so much about League. I was a Dota player, so I apologize for that. But similar enough, you wouldn't play a game where probably, maybe there's some people that have done crazy shit like this, right? But just like 5 people just go jungle for the whole game, right? Like you could feasibly do that. That's a feasible strategy, but it would be probably nonsense, right? But someone looks at the game, there's no reason why they wouldn't think that was a reasonable approach, right? There isn't, right? And maybe they think it's a more effective way to play the game, right? So in some ways, actually, the really important thing about sitting down and formalizing it is you challenge your underlying assumptions. What have you already said? Like, this is how it works. Because often those are that's the bit exactly what you described, where you're like, am I actually wrong? Because again, as a scientist, that is often the most important thing when it comes to science, is to challenge your belief in the first place. What is it that you're assuming is true?
I think that's so crucial, and a mistake that we make over and over again. Where, I mean, we have this problem currently in League of Legends. I don't want to make it specifically League of Legends. Like, coaching focus is fine. Stick to Valorant is good. But we have this problem at the moment where something changes with the way that Riot is running the tournament, or with the way that they're just doing things. And I see over and over, everyone just keeps doing the same approach because it's just the inherited wisdom. And, you know, one of my kind of sporting idols is probably too strong a word, but a coach that I look to a lot is Dave Brailsford. And one of the things that he talks about is when he first came into cycling, that was the whole point. They wanted to hire sports scientists who are not involved in cycling. Because we wanted to very specifically be not held back by any of the inherited wisdom. We just say, right, we need to destroy the enemy's base, or we need to win X number of rounds. Like, how do we go about it? Let's not just do it because this is the best team, because it's suboptimal when people do that in sport. But in sport, people have had 100 years to refine that inherited wisdom, and it's still suboptimal. Whereas we've been doing it for like 5 years, and somehow think that, like, in those 5 years, we found the best way of doing things. And my kind of approach always is, whenever I see a performance pattern or an approach that, like, I was there when it first started, I'm always so quick to throw that out, because it's like, I know how much I knew back then, and I wouldn't trust me to coach. So why are we all doing that? And it's something that I think is, I think it's just such a good point, no matter where we are.
Yeah, I think again, often we aren't really. I mean, I think we are, but I think maybe, again, I don't know how broadly this goes, but I think that we often. I'm not going to throw specific names under the bus here, but I think that we have maybe some people in leadership that are not innovating. They are doing what we've all done because we don't have the formal training, right? We've looked at what other teams are doing, because that's the only learning resource most of us have, right? To start off, got no fucking idea what's going on. Well, what does Fnatic do, right? They're a good team. I know who they are as an organization. I can look at what they do, right? Copy what they do, or, you know, take any other big organization, Team Liquid, Loud, you know, like, think of any top organization across the world. You can look at what they do and you can say, okay, can we replicate what they're doing? Can I first of all understand it, and then can I try and replicate it? And a lot of the people that have become very successful have got very good at doing that. But I think we aren't maybe mature enough in the scene where we have people that, or we are really forced to innovate. Because I certainly think it's true, and this is probably true in most esports because they're so young, is the skill difference in individuals is still much larger than the strategy matters, right? So the best player in the world, like someone like Faker, right, who everyone knows, he's a household name in esports across the board. If you know nothing about League of Legends, you've heard of Faker, right? Someone like that is, I mean, I don't know where he is right now, you know, because again, I don't follow League very, very closely, but there are people like that in every esports title that are have just been so good for so long and so much better than everyone else that the strategy mattered somewhat, right? The teammates mattered, of course. Of course, all of those things mattered. Things still did matter, but the skill difference on an individual level is very, very large. And this is definitely true in Valorant today. There are players that they just shoot better. You know, it's a shooting game. You can have the best strategy in the world, but if a guy, you know, he avoids all of the utility and he's just positioned and 5 guys walk out in front of him and he just shoots all of them in the head faster than the other guys do, doesn't matter, right? Like fundamentally, it's just better, right? And there's only so much you could do to beat that if your players just aren't as good, right? It's as simple as that. And I guess we aren't often pushed to innovate because also, again, the sample sizes are still so small, right? So the individual variance is much larger. Maybe again, some people might not understand what I mean by that, but I guess you know, any human population has a distribution of skill, and if you're the larger your sample size, right, you kind of imagine this distribution of people. If you've got lots and lots of people, some from it, you're going to be able to then get a lot of people at the top. If your sample size is very small, only some of the people come from the top 0.0001%. Many of those people are probably not doing esports because there's better ways to make money. There's other things that you can do that, you know, that you may have thought of doing in the first place. You just chose to be excellent at something else, right? And so we still have that very, very large variance in esports because it's not that popular yet, right? However much we're seeing it's growing and it's becoming a kind of, I guess, a mainstream thing to do. We're not at the point where I think the individual skill has equalized even at the highest level of play.
And I think as well as the sample size, it's the short timelines as well.
yeah.
If you're going to do the right thing and you're going to do all the right things as an organization, not just as a team. I mean, you're talking about looking at who's at the top. I don't know if anyone would be able to make a good argument as to why the whole EG organization, like the things that they did, ended up in the victory. It's like that's quite a difficult thing, I think.
Yeah.
But you get this idea. I can't remember what the book is actually called, but someone made a point where in modern workplace, no one ever gets fired by following the data. And I really, really love that, taking that into esports, where we're not actually talking about data in this case, but following the good teams. So in League of Legends, it's like, okay, all the Korean teams are doing this. If you're in charge and you copy what the Korean teams are doing and you lose, it's like, well, at least we copied the Korean teams. Whereas if you try something new and you lose, suddenly it's like it's your fault. And I think that happens kind of all the way down, but especially at the level that kind of should be looking to innovate and should be looking to try something new. So if we just follow the inherited wisdom and it goes wrong, then you can say, well, everyone else is doing this, so it wasn't my fault because like we're all doing the same thing. Whereas if you actually took a stand and say, okay, we're going to approach this in a different way because I've just thought, okay, if the only thing was to win rounds, how would I do it? And I've come up with something different. If it doesn't work, it's on you, I think.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really, really great way of putting it, John. It's just, if everyone else is doing it, so I'll do that, right? Right? Like there's no argument you can really make against that. I think another part of it as well, like we say about the kind of sample size, is just kind of it's no surprise, right? But just the instability in your career, right? Like one day you're in, one day you're out. Oh shit, well, I've got to do something else then, right? Because there's no money in tier 2. I mean, it depends obviously where you are, right? I think there's a big variety of things, right? But you can very quickly get to the point where you're making no money and you're basically having to play full time. It's just not feasible, right? So how do you expect any talent to ever develop? People that kind of need time, which is definitely true, right? There are definitely people that have incredibly high skill ceilings, but their skill floor is very low and they just needed time. Maybe they just won't get it, right? It's just, sorry, finished university, I've either got to start doing a full-time job or I need to be paid. And maybe you're not at the skill level yet where you can really persuade someone to give you money to do it.
Yeah, and I think all of these things just all combine to push us to take less and less risks, and that's how we end up in the same situation.